thought I'd make a video. This is the big one. Okay, this is where we look at all of those numbers that we looked at in the previous session called Pyramidia 1 on the pyramids and all the sacred numbers within the pyramids, all the measurements. What do they mean? What do lots of things mean? So what we're going to do is I'm going to minimize me and get onto the main content. Here we go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we talked about in the previous video, if you remember, was this structure here. You know, we were looking at the pyramids and particularly the Great Pyramid and what is inside it. And we talked about the outer coning, didn't we? And we talked about the inside coated in crystal that vibrates from the Schumann resonance, which comes up through these coil structures here, which have been discovered underneath the Great Pyramid and causes the whole thing to vibrate. And it vibrates at a frequency of 117 cycles per second, or we call that hertz these days. 117 hertz goes up through these resonator capturing things here up to the top. Lots of copper wire has been stolen from the pyramids, and they found these huge kind of almost like copper handles which are corroded, onto which of course these wires were connected, and that's where the electricity went up to this golden dome here, and it was piped off the top. So we're going to be looking a little bit more at that. We're going to be looking a bit more at the actual what are the significance of these numbers. 117, the Schumann resonance, 783. We're going to look at a lot of numbers. We're going to look at what this mysterious thing here is. What is it? What is it? What is it? Okay, we're going to be looking at the tree of life. We're going to look at all kinds of things. And here is my explanation in the previous video about how the pyramids capture sound very much like a loudspeaker does. Okay, let's just move on. The numbers that we're concerned with. Okay, let's start off with 7.83 and 117, because I believe these numbers associated with the pyramids and various other archaeological and antiquated buildings of all the world's great traditions and stories and symbolic, spiritual, pseudo-religious, whatever you want to call it. That's what we're going to examine, not from a religious point of view, more from a spiritual, investigative and scientific and mathematical, if you will. That's the view we're looking at. Let's see if we can prove something here. Where does it lead us? Where do these numbers lead us? Okay, we've got the Earth's frequency, the Schumann resonance, the 7.83 hertz. You can look that up. It's everywhere. It's continuous. It's caused by the lightning, which is continually around the world as we speak, all over the world, and that causes this frequency between the ionosphere and the Earth's core, and it makes the whole kind of Earth have a heartbeat of 7.83 hertz, and also octave of that, what we call a musical octave or harmonic, is 117, and we find that the King's Chamber is tuned precisely to 117 hertz. 7.83 and 117 come up, causes this to vibrate, makes electricity. Simple as that. But we're not too interested in that. Okay, it could be a generator. I think it is. Of electricity. Look here, we've got the coils piping up the sound from underneath. But we're not going to concentrate on that. What we're going to concentrate in this one is the bigger mystery and the significance of these numbers, because I think you'll agree when we get to the end of this is quite amazing. This is more incredible than whether the pyramids, source of power, electric, okay, brilliant. It's all of those things. But let's move on from that. Let's look at the numbers. 7.83, 117. We discover, and you can find all this stuff out for yourself. I put some little kind of excerpts here, which I've just borrowed, that's the word I'm looking for, borrowed from the internet. It's well known, there's Schumann resonance, 7.83, the King's Chamber resonates at 117. There are outer layers, if you count all these layers of stones, there are 216 of them. So that's another number that we're interested in. Here we see this one talking about the 117. This is from AI. You can put this in. The King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid is known for its unique acoustic properties to create a specific resonance frequency potentially around 117 hertz. Now, the other thing that we're absolutely fascinated with here is there was, as I explained in the previous video, I wanted a picture here of a white pyramid. I'll show you that. I'll pop that in. But those casing stones that were on the outside, which have now basically all been stolen, but there were initially 144,000 of them. That's another number that we're very, very interested in. 144,000. Again, you can find this all over the internet. So these are our numbers. 144,000. 216. The resonance of the King's Chamber here. 117. And of course the Earth's resonance 783, get rid of that. So here's our numbers. Schumann resonant frequency 7.83, King's Chamber resonant frequency 117, white stones on the outside of the pyramid 144,000. How many layers? 216. Okay, just keep those numbers in your head for a bit. Something might occur to you. You might see what they've all got in common, but let's move on and see if we can all find out at the same time. There is another building which was discovered in Cambodia. Well, it was brought to the public attention. It was rediscovered, let's say that, in about 1860 by a French explorer. Anyway, what's important is that when we look at Angkor, it's basically a Buddhist temple that they discovered in the jungle of Cambodia. Here's the thing, let's look at the measurements, because they used cubits as well in the same way that the Egyptians used cubits. The important thing is not so much about what a cubit is, it's about how many are there. So here we see these numbers appearing again, you see. The length of the bridge, for example, was 216 cubits, which symbolized a total of 432. And that represents the 432,000 years of the Kali Yuga. Now, a yuga is like it's basically a period, an era of time, according to the ancient Hindu calendar, which we'll come to in a little bit. We'll look a bit more at that. They're called yugas. We're currently in what's called the Kali Yuga. Okay, and incidentally, that's the piece of software that I'm using here, which I wrote, because I'm a computer programmer as well. I build things. That doesn't matter. So what matters here, the entire Angkor Wat complex is 1728 cubits long. So let's take those numbers, as we did with the pyramids, move on, and what have we got? We've got the entire Angkor Wat complex is 1728, 216, just like the layers of the pyramids. Remember, we discovered that? Layers of stones, 216, same. Years of the Kali Yuga. Okay, this Kali Yuga, I just put a quick diagram here to show this. If you imagine this is a ball, and this is how the Hindu kind of eras are split up. I'm not going to try and pronounce all these. Dvapara, Satyakrita, Treta Yuga, and the Kali Yuga. I think I did well there. So it basically moves well here. It basically circles around, and as you can see, this great period, the years of the Kali Yuga. We start again, we repeat ourselves. More on that later, but that's fascinating. But what we're most interested in here are these numbers, folks. These numbers. What do they all mean? Okay, let's move on. So let's just talk a little bit here about this Hindu vast epoch calendar, this Yuga cycle of numbers. Essentially, we've got the Sat Yuga, which is 1728, the Tetra Yuga, which is 1296, these are years, the Dwapar Yuga, forgive my pronunciation, 864, and the Kali Yuga, 432. Okay, these are the numbers. I mean, what I've basically done, I've taken the zeros out, because we're not particularly interested in zeros. We want to know these numbers, so I put them down here. Let's move forward from the Yuga cycle numbers. Now we come to the heart of this journey through these mystical numbers. What do they mean? Okay, we've looked at Egyptology. We've looked at Mesopotamian. We're going to look at Mesopotamian. Basically looking at the entire epoch of humanity, right up to today, if you like, the vast panoply, is that a good word? Era of humanity. Through this vast era of humanity, right from prehistory, everything we know on a huge infinite timescale, if you like, up until the present day, we're looking at various kind of civilizations that have cropped up. But what's fascinating is that through this period of thousands upon thousands, and who knows millions, who knows billions of years, we find cultures and we find buildings and we find temples, religious temples. We find great teachings are brought to us. In Egypt, this was symbolized as these great sages, the Anunnaki. That's how it's pronounced, Anunnaki. We'll talk about that later. What we're really looking at here is this great span of humanity's growth and progression through these incredible vast ages and epochs and civilization. And we find that all these incredible temples, including these energy plants, the pyramids, etc., Angkor Wat, and all temples and buildings mentioned in biblical and pre-biblical and outside of biblical stories, traditions like the Tablet of Gilgamesh, for instance, this flood story, which correlates with Noah's flood story. We're going to look at that. But let's start by looking at some of the statements in the Bible and external traditions concerning temples, monuments, other forms of sanctuary, spiritual, metaphysical, mystical meaning. Where are we going? The most great secret. Okay, that's what this channel is called, the most great secret, because what we're going to expose here is what I believe to be the most great secret, enshrouded in all the world's traditions. So now, okay, we've moved through Egyptology, Mesopotamia. We've looked a little bit at the Buddhist and the Hindu in the Angkor Wat temple measurements. Let's look at some other measurements that are given to us, this time in the Old Testament, what we call the Bible. The Bible, incidentally, is a word that comes from, they used to make papyrus, pages on which they wrote. The Egyptians wrote things on papyrus. And the word Bible means papyrus, a great big collection of papyrus. That's what it means. Let's move on. We're going to start at the beginning and the end of the Bible, but if we just go to the end first, in Revelation 11:1, it says, "And the angel said to me, rise and measure the temple of God." Now this is important to us because what we're looking at all the time here in Angkor Wat and in the pyramids are measurements, and we want to know what the significance of those numbers are, because in the book of Revelation, this angel who came to John of Patmos, John was sent to the island of Patmos near Greece as a prisoner. It was a prison island. It was punishment for him being believer in Yeshua ben Joseph, who is. So the angel said, rise and measure the temple. Now, a lot of more modern translations of the Bible, I think the Good News Bible, has misinterpreted this measure as count, because they can't make any sense of it. They haven't got it's such a shame. Anyway, it says rise and measure. And we know it means measure because if you look at the original Greek of this, Jesus spoke in Aramaic and the disciples transcribed in Greek. And the word they use is metron, and from that word we get the meter. That's our measurement, the meter. Metron means measure. It doesn't mean count, it means measure. That's the important thing. Rise and measure. And we further strengthen this by statement in the Old Testament in Zechariah. Okay. Then said I, whither goest thou, to the angel? And he said unto me, to measure Jerusalem, to see what the breadth and what is the length thereof. Look that up yourself. Zechariah 2.2, the breadth and the length. That's what it means, measure. Rise and measure. So we've measured the pyramid. We've discovered it's got 144,000 stones on the outside. It's got a resonant frequency of 117. It's tuned to 7.83, 216 layers of stones. Okay, let's measure these temples. And we'll also measure a few other things, but let's go on. So here we go. We measure the width and the breadth of these temples. And what we do when we've got those, in order to find the area, we multiply those together, don't we? And if we want to find the volume of something, if we've got the width, the breadth and the height, like a box, and we want to find the volume of that, then we multiply those three numbers together, the width, the breadth and the height. Sometimes we're given height and breadth, sometimes we're given height, breadth and width. Sometimes two numbers, sometimes three. Anyway, what we've got here, the temple, let's start. The first temple was a tent, of course, during the time of Moses and the Israelite. Let's move on. The actual outer curtains measured 1260. There's our first number. We'll start with that number. King David wanted to build a temple to God, but that duty was given to his son Solomon. That's why we call it Solomon's temple. But here's the thing we're interested in Kings. Again, you can find this, Kings 6:2. Have a look yourself, First Kings. The measurements are given precisely to Solomon, 60 by 20 by 30. We multiply those together and we get 36,000. Here's the thing, the same temple in Chronicles is described as 60 by 20 by 120. What number does that give us? That gives us 144,000. Well, we've seen that before, haven't we? We've seen that number before. That's an important number to us. Let's just go back. There, remember, the 144,000 casing stones on the outside of the pyramids. Tura, white stones on the outer of the pyramids, 144,000. The same number here. That's what we're interested in. Okay. Then there was a Zerubbabel's temple. This temple was destroyed. Then Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple. This time we're not given any height. We're just given 60 by 60, but that gives us the number of 3,600. So let's just go back to this. This is important. Zechariah 2:2. We touched upon this previously. Whither goest thou? To measure Jerusalem. Okay, we looked at that word measure. It comes from metron, doesn't it? In the Greek, in the New Testament. Here, of course, it is in Hebrew, but it has the same meaning. Measure Jerusalem to see what is the breadth and what is the length. This time we're looking not so much at the temple. Let's look at the holy city Jerusalem. Now, in the book of Revelation 21, the holy city Jerusalem is said to be 12,000 by 12,000 furlongs. What we're interested in is 12,000 times 12,000, because what does that give us? It gives us that, which is 144 million. Okay, we can lose the zeros, can't we? We're only interested in that 1 and the 4 and 4. So 144 million. And let's look at the same holy city Jerusalem. Okay, remember we're looking at the breadth and the length of what? Jerusalem. Okay, we're measuring Jerusalem. And we find in the book of Ezekiel, and it says it was round about 18,000 measures. There's our other number, 18,000. So we've got 18,000, 144 million, 3,600, 144,000, 3,600, 1,260. Okay, these are our numbers. Now then, here's another amazing one. Okay, these are temples. There are other structures that we're told to build in biblical as well as outside of the Bible. We find things like the Atrahasis. Anyway, I'm leaping ahead. We're looking at the ark. All this section here is concerning the ark. Noah's ark, we're given 300 by 50 by 30, Genesis 6:15. That gives us 450,000. There it is. The Atrahasis ark, that is 120 by 120, and that gives us 14,400. The Gilgamesh ark is also 120 by 120. That gives us another 14,400. All the arks have decks and a window where light enters, and all stories, whether we're talking about Noah's ark, the Gilgamesh ark, or the Atrahasis, all have these things in common. The light enters through a window, and the animals enter 2 by 2. And in both stories, a raven is let out first. Most people don't know this. A raven is let out first. We know that there was a dove let out, but a lot of us don't realise there was a raven let out, and the raven doesn't come back. The dove comes back to signify that there's land out there. And that dove is white, representing light. The raven is black, which represents darkness. Now you can draw your own conclusions from that, but I will be making a series of videos within this series talking about that light and darkness, good and bad, sheep and goats, who knows, we'll get to that. We will get there, but we've got a long way to go before we get there. Let's carry on. Now this is where it starts to get really, really, really fascinating. Okay, so when in the biblical story Moses built the tabernacle, then he had the 10 commandments, were kept in a box which biblical scholars, historians, archaeologists, you name it, have been searching for thousands upon thousands of years, because it did vanish. But we've got a great description of it in the Bible, and this is called the Ark of the Covenant. Here we are. A quick search on the internet gives us, this is what it looked like. Going on those descriptions, of course, the most famous film is The Raiders. The Raiders of the Lost Ark, we all know that, don't we? Indiana Jones. What was the actor's name? Come on, you all know. Harrison Ford, for goodness sake, there he is. Okay, but what we're interested in here is, the story's amazing, isn't it? It all the way through David and Bathsheba, and the ark was lost. Maybe we'll look at that later. But the amazing thing is, let's look at these measurements. Again, these numbers, because we're given measurements. The Ark of the Covenant box. Again, look this up. It's in the Bible, it's well known. 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5 cubits. Okay, so what's the volume? The volume is 5.625. That's another number we're interested in. The Holy City Jerusalem, 12,000 by 12,000 reeds, 1728 by 10 to the power of 9. Now we get on to something absolutely astonishing, which we'll look into a little bit down the line. For the moment, it says, and I heard the number of them that were sealed, 144,000. This is very, very important to us. We've seen this number before, 144,000, haven't we? We've seen it in the measurements of the Solomon's Temple in Chronicles. We've seen it on the white stones, which were the outer casing, the insulation, Tura white stones on the outer casing of the pyramids, the Great Pyramid in Giza, 144,000 of those stones. So that number is very important to us. We will also find it without the zeros, the 144. In particular, in this this wonderful statement here. The man who is an angel. This word angel, this gets very misconstrued and misinterpreted. The word angel simply comes from the Greek angelos, which means a messenger. Somebody comes with a message, usually a good message, Don't shoot the messenger, they say, don't they? That is the real meaning of an angel. So wherever you see the word angel, interpose the word messenger. There is a messenger whose number is 144, okay, and that is at the heart of all these 144,000s and 14,400s and 144s that we come across in these great traditions and spiritual stories. There is another wonderful statement here. This is a wonderful story about the disciples. They were fishing all night, weren't they, on the Lake Galilee, and they couldn't catch any fish and they were exhausted. In the morning they saw this figure on the shore, stranger on the shore. Remember that wonderful song? And of course it turned out to be Yeshua ben Joseph. It turned out to be Jesus. But they didn't recognize him until he said, cast your net on the other side. They hadn't caught any fish, but when they cast their net on the other side, they caught a myriad of fish, a multitude of fish. And that's interesting. Remember that multitude, because that crops up. A multitude that nobody could count. And here's the thing, when they recognized it was Jesus and they all swam ashore and they brought the fish in. And then at the very last words of that story, Peter, he gets the fish on the shore in the net, and that multitude of fish which no one can count, he counts them, and there's 153. That's another number. Okay, 153, 144, 144,000, 1728, 5.625. Let's move on. Now I want to talk something about this number here, the 144,000, okay, because we've seen that number a lot, haven't we? Yeah, let's just go back to where we're given the instruction. The angel said, rise and measure, not count, measure, metron, the altar and the temple, and them that worship within. This is the great multitude that stood before God. That's what we're interested in. Measuring, not counting. And we discovered that number is 144,000. Or if we haven't discovered, we're about to. After this, I beheld a great multitude which no man could number, okay, that's the thing, stood before the throne, okay, that's important, clothed with white. Now I just want to point out that those Tura casing stones, 144,000 stones on the outside of the pyramids, they were white. Okay, so here we see those who stood before the throne were also clothed in white. This white obviously is a sign of purity. White means purity. And they had palms in their hands. That again is incredibly important, these palms, because we find these palms in the hands of the Anunnaki. Pine tree depicts victory. Remember, the palm leaves were waved at Jesus when he entered Jerusalem. What we're interested in here is that this is a great multitude that no man could number. And here we have in Revelation 4:33, the 144,000 people who stood before the throne. There it is, stood before the throne. They are the only ones who've been redeemed. So here we find that that great multitude who stood before the throne, that no man could number, well, they have a number, 144,000. And the angel said measure, not count. So that is the measure of the people that stood before the throne. And that is one element of this most great secret, and that reveals so much to us, because that number, 144,000 and 144, is so important to us. And all of these great temples, they have a throne, they have an altar, they have what we call the King's Chamber in the pyramids, is what we call the Holy of Holies in all of these temples, and every single one of them, whether we're talking about Angkor Wat, the pyramids, the temples in the Bible, there is a center. We've got the King's Chamber, we've got the sarcophagus in the center, which some people said contained an ark of the covenant. Remember we measured that, 1.5 times 2.5 times 1.5, 5.625 cubic cubits, right? This has great relevance to us. And here we again in Revelation we see with him were the 144,000 people who have his name and his father's name written in their foreheads. Now this is a theme that we'll come back to later, just what is written in their foreheads, not in this video but in the next video. And I heard the number of them that were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000. We'll talk a lot about what it means to be numbered. When you say I've got the measure of the man, or I know I've got his number, what does that mean? Your number is up. What does it mean? So for the moment, here are all the numbers, right, that we've accumulated in our journey from Mesopotamia to the pyramids of the Egyptians, or pre-Egyptians, as we're beginning to discover now that there was a previous revelation. We're talking about a civilization prehistoric, pre-Egyptian. There was an incredible civilization that was able to build these incredible structures like the pyramids, and we're discovering so much, aren't we, now that these great archaeologists and scientists are realizing, well, the Egyptians couldn't have built this. This was far beyond their technical ability. It's beyond our technical ability. We're talking about our ancestors who were so more advanced that they were able to cut rock, marble with absolute precision. They didn't do it with chisels and hammers, you know. It was done with incredibly sophisticated equipment, and the mathematics is incredibly sophisticated. Simple, also sophisticated, as we shall find out, because what we're going to look at now is these numbers which we've gathered from all of antiquity, through all the traditions, whether it's the Bible, the tales of Gilgamesh, tales of Mesopotamia, tales of Egyptology. We're given measurements and numbers. Let's put them all together and see if we can find out, what do these numbers have in common? What do they mean? What are they pointing us at? Let's look. Here's the numbers. 144,000. We've talked about that one a lot. 216 stones, levels of stones on the pyramids. 117, the resonance of King's Chamber. 7.83, the Schumann resonance, the frequency that comes up to the bottom of the pyramid and creates electricity. The 144,000, we've just spoken about that, haven't we? The 144,000, the outer casing, the white stones of purity on the outer casing of the pyramids. There are 144,000. The pure people who stood before the throne of the Ancient of Days in the visions of Ezekiel, Zechariah, Revelation. They are dressed in white, the same as the white casing stone of the pyramid. It almost symbolizes, that pyramid symbolizes almost like one of those 144,000 people, you know, great white robe, and their number is 144,000. They are dressed in white, they have palm leaves. The Anunnaki had palm cones, we'll come to that later, but we're interested in the number 144,000. 432, this is the numbers we got from Angkor Wat. 1728, this number here, the entire area of Angkor Wat. 864, now we're looking at Kali Yugas and things. 1296, 1260, this is a number mentioned in the book of Revelation. 450,000 cubits. Noah's Ark, 450,000 cubits. The area of the Gilgamesh Ark and the previous one, the one prior to that, 14,400. The outer wall, 36. The volume of the Ark of the Covenant, 5.625 cubic cubits. 1728, the Holy City, Jerusalem. 144, the number, nearly gave it away, of the man who is a messenger, an angel, 144, and the fish that Jesus told the disciples to catch. There was 153. Great multitude that nobody could number, just like the 144,000. Their number is 153. Just like the multitude before the throne have a number, 144,000. The multitude of fish also have a number, 153. What do all those numbers have in common? This is it, folks. This is the answer. Look at them. Look at them. There is one number and one number alone that has a magical quality. Whatever number you multiply it by, you can add the digits up, and those digits will always add up eventually to it itself. And that number is the number 9. Look at these numbers. 216, 117. What have they got in common? 6, 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9. 432, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 144,000. Forget the zeros. 144. 2 4s are 8 and 1 is 9. Every single one of these numbers, even 7.83, okay, 8, 9, 10, 11, plus 7 is 18. 1 and 8 equals 9. Let's carry on. 1728. Again, you've got another 18 there. 8, 9, 10 and 8 is 18. 1 and 8 is 9. Add all those together. You've basically got 7, 8, 9. That leaves with 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's a 9 there. 3 9s. What are 3 9s? 27. What does 27 equal? 2 and 7? 9. And as we go on, 8, 6 and 4 the same. 1296 the same. 1260 the same. 450,000. Chop off the zeros. Plus 4 and 5. 9. 3 and 6, 9. 5.625, that's the inner volume of the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, add 5 and 6 and 2 and 5 together. Okay, 5 and 5 is 10, 6 and 2 is 8, that's 18, isn't it? 1 and 8 equals 9. Same with 1728, same with 144. The number of the man who is the messenger. How many fish did the disciples catch? 153. The answer, all of these numbers, is one number and one number alone. It's that. And to further cement this, we will go on now to look at something incredible from the Anunnaki. There's a group of beings called the Anunnaki. We've spoken about those. And there's a similar word we get in Egypt. Anunnaki comes from Mesopotamia. From Egypt, they're called the Ennead. The Ennead. And there were 9 of these Ennead. And the word Ennead itself, this is going to be in the next video, but I'll just throw it in now. The word Ennead means 9. There is no doubt whatsoever that these numbers, what the pyramids are telling us, and the Schumann resonance, the stones, absolutely everything, even through to the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Noah's Ark, they've all got one thing in common, the number 9. Pyramids are built around the number 9. It's estimated that the inner volume of the pyramid is 18 million cubic cubits. 18 million. 1 and 8, 9. What does this mean? Here's one clue. The ancient Semitic language, or pre-Hebrew Mesopotamian, from which all other languages thought evolved, even hieroglyphic, they represent not only a sound but a number. In our English, we have, in common English, if you like, we've got an alpha numeric system. So we've got the alpha, which basically is, it's the alphabet. That's what the word comes from, alpha. And that is A to Z, A, B, C, D, F, G, all the way to Z. And then we have a number system, don't we, from 1 to 9, or from 0 to 9, and then those numbers start repeating themselves, where 10 is a 1 and a 0. So essentially we've got these digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that comprises our numerical system. Well, here's the thing. In ancient Sumeria, when all these things were built and all these numbers were given to us, even in the Greek and in the ancient Hebrew of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the epic tales of Gilgamesh and what have you, the two systems of alphanumeric, they were as one. A letter also represented a number, and what we're looking at here is something called Hebrew gematria, sometimes commonly given the name of numerology. It is actually a precise science, the spiritual element of a, if you like, physical reality, even though it's kind of metaphysical as well. The Hebrew gematria was based on the Hebrew alphabet, which is Aleph, Bet, Gimel. These had numbers associated with them, and to the left here I've got the numbers associated with them. So Kaf was 20, Nun is 50, Alpha is 1, Gimel is 3, and so you go on. Sadi, the final one, is 900. And from this is where this association of your name having a vibration and a numerical quality to it. So if your name was, for instance, Bob, what they've done, there were some people called Mathers and Gregor, who had basically transferred this Hebrew language, because our English language comes from this. So they'd made a more simple chart, which is referred to as the Chaldean numerology table, where they've basically assigned our common English A, B, C, D, F, G to correlate with that. So Aleph becomes our A, Bet becomes our B, C is the Hebrew Gimel, and so we have this system here. And so essentially you can find out the number of a person's name, and this is what it means when you say, I know your number, I've got the measure of the man, right? That's what it means. It comes from this idea that a person's name, especially in ancient Hebrew and Greek and the times of Jesus, the times of Moses, your name had a number, it had a vibration. All sound has a vibration, and so does your name. It's almost like a sign of your character, your personality, your very being. That is the number associated with you. It's like if you're Pisces in astrology, you have certain characteristics, and we can define a person's character in that way. They're Taurus, they're bull-like, they're Pisces. Ooh. So for instance, if your name is Bob, let's pick a simple name, and then you just take the numbers here. Well, a B is a 2, O is a 7, and another B, that's 2. Add those together. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Add the 2 together. Bob is a 2. In some systems we keep the 11 because the 11 is we'll talk about that later. Essentially Bob is a 2. So you can do this with any name. You can do this with your own name. Okay, let's just say Steve. What is the S? The S is a 3. So we get 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. 2 and 3 equals 5. So I am a 5 if you call me Steve. My full name's Steve Day or Stephen Raymond Day. It doesn't really matter. It comes up with different numbers. And there's certain characteristics that go along with the 5. And that is how you know the number of a man. the measure, I've got his measure. I know his name and his number. I know his vibration. I know his very being. But what we're looking for is not 5, we're looking for that. So that is our answer. The number is 9. That is the answer to all of that, all of that. In fact, everything. Measure the people, measure the altar, measure the pyramids, measure the ark, absolutely everything we've done. Angkor Wat, Schumann resonance, the pyramids, everything is to do with that number. Okay, we're going to divulge the most great secret. All of the numbers, the answer is that. Okay, here's our numbers that we've looked at. I spoke briefly about a group of beings from ancient Egyptology called the Ennead, and the word Ennead means 9. And here are those 9 people: Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Jeb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys. 9 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's what this number 9 is pointing at. Also, as we said, it points towards them and their name, possibly the name that we're looking for. We'll find out more about that in the next video. In the next video, also, we're going to be looking at these Anunnaki, the Anunnaki of the Sumerians, which equates to the Ennead of the Egyptians. These people of the number 9. And what have they got in their hand? What have they got in their hand? They've got a tree behind them. They're angels. You see, they're messengers, the wings. They have a bag. You can't see the bag here. We'll look at that next time. And that contains wisdom and specifications and measurements and numbers. And behind him is the tree of life. What is in his hand? That is a palm cone. This is the palm cone. It denotes the tree of life. It is a symbol of the tree of life. And here again we have a depiction of that very same tree of life and cone. And there's the serpent with the tree of life. And that is also the Garden of Eden story. We had the tree of life, we had the tree of good and evil, which God said, don't eat from that one, don't eat from that one. And they did. So we not only have parables of Noah's Ark story and the Gilgamesh story and the previous Ark and flood stories, we have this symbolism of the creation story as well with the tree of life. So that's going to be in the next video. So basically, I'm going to say goodbye now, but in the next video, here's what we're going to look at. Who are the Anunnaki? Who are those people with the palm cones? What do their palm cones signify? What is in their bag? Who are the Neteru? Who are the Nephilim? The giants, the people of renown, spiritual giants, of renown of a previous era spoken of. What does the number 9 specify precisely? And what is sealed in the forehead of the number 9 people? We're going to find out. Bye for now.